Peace, family, and welcome again to the TITANIC podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is, the head drapetomaniac in charge, and we're here to have conversations on how to get off this plantation. This week on social media, I saw commentary after commentary about what Cardi B said about Candace Owens, and it irritated me to the point that I went and talked to my wife about it. We as people have been conditioned to major in the minors.
Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that you listeners are listening to the Drapetomaniac podcast on doayamedia.com. You are, right?
To have arguments and discussions about how the furniture needs to be arranged, how the pictures need to be hung, who gets the biggest stateroom, and who gets the smallest. Or that someone gets a nicer and bigger cut of steak than we did at dinner. And we're having all these arguments and heated discussions and debates as we're aboard the Titanic, while it's sinking. And as one or two of our people are running up and down the hallways and around the deck screaming, "The ship is sinking, get to a lifeboat or find some way to get yourself and your family to safety." Others, with huge megaphones and access to the PA system, are making sure that everyone stays stirred up and focused on trivialities. Everyone who knows me knows that I try to put things as diplomatically as possible. I always try to seek to show the highest respect to anyone I come in contact with. But frankly, I don't get caught up in discussions about what some celebrity said or did, even if it could be put into a broader context. I'm paying close attention to what's going on in Washington, what's happening culturally, and not this surface foolishness, but down deep. I'm listening to and reading more and more commentary about the environment, radiation, climate change, the economy, and so on. That takes up about 90% of what I consume now. I listen to Neely Fuller daily. I listen to Chris Hedges, who is white, but I find not all, but most of what he has to say, especially about the decline and ultimate collapse of the United States, is spot on. I also listen to and read economists who are giving the facts about what is happening right now. The rest of the time I'm writing or working on something to move me, my family, and ultimately our people forward. To those who listen to these podcasts through doayamedia.com, first, I thank you. And you may not be aware of a YouTube channel called The Radical Sister, hosted by Sister Ajali. She is a housewife in Newark, New Jersey, and she has forgotten more about the subject of Fukushima, nuclear meltdowns, and the spread and effects of radiation on this planet than most of us will ever know. She's been studying the subject intensively for close to a decade and has the bulk of her YouTube videos about that very subject. Yes, she talks about a wide range of subjects that are relevant to our people, including my own crusade, which is separation. But her thesis is, and rightly so, that if no one pays attention to the radiation threat under which we presently exist, then nothing else ultimately matters, on which point I'm also in agreement. I will add a link to her channel. There are many worthy YouTube and other social media channels for people who seek to separate and who also want to know about what is actually going on around them without the distractions of oppression porn and celebrity gossip and who's beefing with whom. No, we can't spend the entirety of our lives being quote-unquote on, as I put it. But at some point, we have to seek to look deeper and seek to find out more information that is relevant to us and not just what is titillating. Outside Black social media, there is a wealth of absolute foolishness, to be sure. But I do find also a large amount of outlets talking about preparing for the collapse of this country. From what I've researched, I would argue that this country has already hollowed out and is done. It's just being propped up artificially through debt and borrowing. And for those who are watching, The wealthy are making money grabs in every area, and we're attributing it to greed. But if you look closer, you realize that it's far deeper and more insidious than that. They know something the majority of people out here don't know, and that is that this system has already failed. We are presently living in a failed state under a government that is 100% owned by oligarchs. And as Chris Hedges points out, and I agree, once a government is owned by corporations and banks, there is no way to vote your way out of it. It is impossible. You cannot vote your way out of it. And just like headless chickens that I discussed in one of my YouTube videos, I'll provide a link, is still running around and flapping like it's still alive, but in reality it was dead as soon as the head was separated from the body, and it's just waiting for death to catch up to it. Every major world power has experienced a fall. Every one, without exception. That includes the United States. It is fast approaching. Again, I would argue that it has already occurred. We just haven't seen the full effects yet, but it is coming. Look around you. In the midst of an unprecedented crisis in this country, leadership, and I use that term very, very loosely, transferred wealth from the bottom to the top and the biggest wealth transfer in the history of mankind. Simultaneously, as people are losing their jobs, their savings, their small businesses, their health, their safety, their homes, and ultimately their lives, those in positions of power in the government are literally, not figuratively, literally doing absolutely nothing to help. Nothing. I get frustrated with the reparations discussion, not because it's not right. I agree with just about every word said about it within the ADOS community. We are owed, and the government has an obligation to make descendants of enslaved Africans in America whole. I agree. My problem? At this point, the entire discussion is moot. We are having this discussion on the Titanic as it is sinking. This country has shown our people in every way possible that not only does it not give a damn about our people, but that it has a deep, abiding, insatiable, active contempt for us. Now look around you. And I'll keep saying this until they spread my ashes along the seashore. They are not paying attention to the white people to whom they have historically given privilege, as they are crying out and they're being thrown into the streets and losing everything. So what in the F makes you think that we can say or do something that will cause them to do right by our people? And they won't even take care of the people that they care about, or so-called care about. We must separate and figure out our own way through this mess. That's what our ancestors used to do, and it worked for them. Angela and I did some research on the many black towns that were not quite as well known as Tulsa, Black Wall Street, Rosewood, and Nicodemus. There were many, and there were also colonies of black people founded outside the U.S. They always did fine until, of course, white people came along and burned them down or blew them up or bombed them from the air. But those are lessons that we have to take from the past, just so that we know that when we do build such communities again, if such a thing is possible these days, that they will have to be protected. But with drone technology being what it is now, I don't even know if it's possible to protect ourselves from their jealousy and irrational hatred. For those who talk about taking back what is ours, again, you are fighting over a room on the Titanic while it's sinking. None of it matters anymore. There are people who don't want the lifeboats to get filled up and actually want to see you go down and die, who are feeding you all kinds of inconsequential drivel in order to keep you from paying attention to the fact that you're on a ship that is sinking and there's no reversing it. And by the time we notice the water is up to our waist, it's already too late. If by some miracle our people finally did get the reparations that we deserve, or we became equal in this society, or we were fully integrated as some long for, with high positions within the government and corporations to go with it, dear hearts, we are on the Titanic and it is sinking. I realize that I don't have a lot of people listening to me, and in part is because the things I say are kind of scary. And to that I say, good, you should be scared. But I also say to those who feel that I'm just a bunch of doom and gloom, there is hope. I have a lot of hope. As a matter of fact, I might be one of the most hopeful people you'll ever meet. And that's because I know that this country has zero to offer our people, if it ever did. But that our hope and our power is in separating from this system, being willing to cut our losses and to just say, okay, United States, you got over. You did indeed steal the time, energy, labor, humanity, and identity of myself and my ancestors, and you pretty much got away with it. But as of right now, no more. Just as with an abusive relationship, where the abused person wastes a bunch of time, energy, and effort trying to fix it, only to find that their true freedom and happiness, joy, and peace was finally achieved ultimately after totally separating from their abuser. So it is with our people. It is always hard at first because there are many, many adjustments that have to be made. But at some point, you get your legs back under you and eventually start to move forward and to thrive. Just talk to anyone who got out of an abusive relationship that was doomed, and they'll tell you years later that it was the best decision they ever made. This system of success, by their definition, let it go. Anything pertaining to the value system of this country, let it go. And seek what is best for you and your people outside of this system. Do not seek violence. That is their square. Leave quietly, peacefully, and with a plan. Yes, it's easier said than done. But one final time. If you wake up to the fact that you're on the Titanic and that it is sinking, are you going to continue standing on the deck having petty arguments with your brother or sister and not even wondering why you're having to stand sideways to keep from falling over? Are you going to keep demanding of the kitchen staff that they give you a nicer cut of steak, even as the water is up to your kneecaps and rising? Are you going to keep arguing over who has the nicest room while paying no attention to the rich people who have on life preservers and are climbing over the side and into lifeboats? Are you going to keep discussing what the person in stateroom A said about the person in stateroom B and how scandalous it is? Not realizing that both the people that you're talking about have reserved spots on the lifeboat and are sitting in them as the ship is sinking and you're talking about them. And you are about to end up floating face down in the cold, cold ocean. Or are you going to just look at the few people who are running around saying that the ship is sinking and looking at them like they don't know what they're talking about because they don't have big fancy blowhorns or that their voices aren't coming through the PA system? So you don't even bother to look over the side to see if maybe, just maybe, they're right. And you need to start putting your time, energy, and attention into how to get you and yours off the ship. And let me clue you into something. The blowhorns are handed out to people who will talk about anything to keep you from listening to the quote-unquote fanatics who are telling you that the ship is sinking. And the ship-wide PA system? Those are reserved for the people who can do the most damage by making sure that you only hear their voices, especially if they're telling you things that will not only keep you from seeing reality, but will actually lead you further down into the bowels of the ship while it's sinking. I'm here to tell you as plainly as I can. This country is over as we know it. Don't take my word for it. Study, research, and if this society and everyone is trying to have you look up, look down. If they're telling you to look left, then look right. Pay attention and see things as they are. Thank you for listening to this Drapetomaniac podcast. This is Ayapo Yaba, the HDIC. That is the head Drapetomaniac in charge. Wishing you peace and blessings, safety, sanity, and security until next week at this same time. And until then, I'll see you on the run.
And thank you again for listening to the Drapetomaniac podcast. Tune in next week at doiamedia.com. DOIAMEDIA.com. And again, we'll catch you on the run. Peace.